I'll call the December 20th, 2023 City Council meeting to order. Virginia, we have some agenda additions and changes.
Yes, we have an amendment to item 7D. It's in the reading file. That letter to CBE has been revised, so I can talk about why down in the manager comments, but basically there was an incorrect comment about fireworks, and so we have a revised letter that we will get into the packet.
Great.
We also have a attachment that was missing in the packet on 5C, so we will add that attachment and get that in the revised packet as well. And then also 5A, we will be postponing.
Okay. Great. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved. Second.
Great. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Great. So we are on to public to be heard. This is a portion of the meeting where members of the public can bring concerns, comments, thoughts to the board on items that are not currently on the agenda for tonight. Is there anyone in the room who has anything to share, you'd like to share with us? Carl, come on up to the seat right in front of you.
What's that?
Come on up to the seat right in front of you if you don't mind. And for the benefit of the person who writes our minutes, if you could give us your full name.
Carlton Houghton.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Last night I came to the would be a planning meeting. What
DRB meeting.
was it? Anyway, the presentation that caught my attention was the old Domino building down here. And they wanted to put up they were requesting permission for a 5-story building, which was permissible, but not mandatory or something on the decision. And if you've ever gone down Park Street during the day, I went down yesterday as an example, about 1 o'clock. School's still in session, so there's no school traffic going. It wasn't, homeward bound traffic or out to work traffic. It was just ordinary. And there was a second car out of Lincoln Street, and I hear a whistle. Chip train's coming back through. But the first car and myself followed. We got safely far enough onto Park Street so it didn't interfere with Pearl Street coming down. And I think one other car got behind me. But that was tied up. Usually those trains run 20 cars. Sometimes they run 24 or 5 cars. Other times it's 18 cars or something like that. But it ties up at least 4 crossings. Meantime, traffic from all directions is funneling in. When I got down by Rockies, I had to stop for another light. And because of the lay of the terrain, you can see all the way to the top of the Power Dam Hill. And it was just inbound traffic. I got there, and now it's inbound and outbound all the way up to Mountain View and Industrial Avenue. In the meantime, these other roads are filling in. It's just, every day. But it's congestion. Mm-hmm. And the chip train just compounds it. And I've talked to a retired engineer, and he says this bypass over here isn't going to solve any direction. Use the familiar phrase, you build it, they'll come. It's just going to compound the traffic. And if they put it in these apartments on four stories. I forgot how many apartments they were, but it was a sizable number. And that's further going to compound. I stopped at the Woodstock making a delivery, but I angled my delivery so I only make right turns. I don't have to cross 2 lanes of traffic. I mean, it's all the time. And I don't think we should have another 4 or 5 story building on that property. It's just going to make that much worse. And I submit we don't have to compromise ourselves for the benefit of somebody who isn't going to live here with their mess after they get through building. The quality of the construction may be sound, but it's just going to compromise the village. There's no serenity or forgot the other word I was going to use, but it's.
I think I get your point.
Our sole responsibility is to the people of this community. We don't have to be solving all these other problems on the backs of local taxpayers. And I would, I guess I don't know if that decision will come to you, this board, before. It won't. Okay.
Those decisions have largely been made in the Land Development Code
Well, they're waiting. They're going to wait
provisions
for
that we passed
a legal meeting
a year ago.
on it before they make a decision.
Sorry, I
They're
never.
going to make a legal. They're going to hand it down to the legal, whichever in Montpelier or somebody. I don't want to misrepresent it, but we'll let the court step in. That's their normal process. That's what John was saying.
I'm sorry, I'm lost.
Yeah, the Domino's project last night was a sketch review in front of the DRB, so that will be sorted out by them. I don't know that there's anything legal happening with that particular project. The Taft Street appeal, notice of violation appeal, was also on the DRB agenda last night, which is already appealed to state environmental court, as folks know, and so that was, I think, probably a different agenda item on that, but
Okay.
yeah.
But anyway, I'm just saying we should. I've emphasized this in a couple of meetings, and this, including this board. It would be our benefit to take a 2 or 3 year moratorium on these buildings till we get things sorted out. This little village has been, it's still a little village, even though we have a city title. There's only so much we can absorb before the quality of life is not very good. We already have crime that we can't get to, can't deal with because of the, part of it's because of the judge in Burlington who just puts you back on the street the next day, so the police don't even bother with some of this stuff. It's not that they're not interested or don't care, but they put their attention somewhere else where they can be more helpful.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I think we get your point.
Okay.
And thank you.
We're still waiting on a senior center. We've lost 25, I'm guessing, 25% of our facility because these offices over here. And the construction is going to be, I think Brad said it, upward to 8 months or something. And I guess it needs to be done. I'm not questioning that. He made a very compelling. I just hope that the seniors don't just give up on it. And I got to wondering, is that why and it's not. We're not doing the 8 months just to have the seniors go away and then it solves all the problems.
No, that's not the intention.
Okay.
I don't think any of us consider. I don't think any of us consider the seniors or the senior center a problem.
What's that?
I don't think any of us consider the seniors or the senior center a problem. I think what we're trying to do is make sure it exists and make sure we can build it up to be more vibrant and active over time. It's right now we've got membership splitting up.
We don't have a bus anymore.
Right.
We don't have the combination to the lock anymore. We used to do all that ourselves. And it was accessible and everything seemed to be humming. And then I learned yesterday from a gal who was been on the seniors for as long as I have. We lost a gal who was in her 90s, and she lived in South Burlington, but she was a vibrant part of that group. Anyway, I'm just trying to stay abreast and learn some more things, but I got to wear this hat. I apologize because I can't look at that light in my eyes.
Yeah, the light's in my eyes too. That's why I took my glasses off.
What's that?
The light's in my eyes too. That's why I took my glasses off.
Well, I didn't bring sunglasses because that doesn't look
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it.
okay.
Thank you.
Let's see, online. Reza Marin, I think you were next. See your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Raj. Risa Marin. I live on Countryside Drive. I have two questions, but they're very quick. The first one is the Williston Observer had an article that Williston is postponing their property tax reappraisal because the state has changed what targets the requirement. It's now only the COD, coefficient of dispersion, that targets it, and it must be over 20% for the state to order that reappraisal. As I see us through our website, and we're still connected with the town of Essex, but it shows us as 11.53% COD. Williston's COD is 12. So I'm wondering if we're also considering postponing this property tax reappraisal.
Not so far that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either, but we can ask.
Okay, since it's a possibility, do you think it's something that will happen?
I don't actually know if you're the only one telling me it's a possibility, which doesn't make you wrong in the least, but you're the first I'm hearing about it, so I wouldn't want to comment any further until we asked. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it does. Thank you. My second thing, very quick also, is there any timeline for when our branding logo updating is going to happen? So the sign stops saying Village of Essex Junction and they start saying City of Essex Junction?
Not at this time. We did reallocate some of that funding for the strategic planning process. We're still working on that right now. So we don't have a start date for that yet.
That's the $40,000 that's sort of carried over year after year. That was budgeted for rebranding.
Well, it's still this year. This current fiscal year is where that is. So it just hasn't been used yet for that.
Okay, and so there's no timeline on that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Craig, you're next. If you could give us your last name for the sake of the minutes for later, that would be great.
Sure. My last name is Dwyer, D-W-Y-E-R, and I live on 10 Taft Street.
Great.
And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge all of the hard work and professionalism that Chris Ewan showed leading the meeting. And in my opinion, a very hubris case of the owner of 8 Taft Street trying to overturn a 41-year zoning of residential to farming commercial. So it's crystal clear to me and the rest of the residents who attended that the DRB is upholding the decision to uphold the 41-year zoning of a residence and not to flip it to commercial or farming. That was crystal clear. And it was also very clear to me that the city is unfortunately in litigation with the owner of 8 Taft Street to figure this out. It's now a legal matter. That was made very clear as well. And it was also made clear that the city is halting fines against the owner of 8 Taft Street, which is understanding, and I think taking the high road. But what I don't believe was communicated is that while the city is halting fines for having livestock on a residential zone, the owner of 8 Taft Street
is not halting the amount of livestock. He has been increasing it over the last month and a half. Matter of fact, it's been doubled. So there used to be 25 livestock, now there's 50, and the owner of 8 Taft Street has also erected new structures on the backyard property that are pretty large. So while the city is halting its fines, the owner is not halting livestock or building structures. It's not a reciprocal idea of halting it, if that makes sense, if I'm being clear. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the city council. It's affecting the quality of life and the real estate value, unfortunately, while this gets handled in court. And I'm understanding of that. That was made clear. But again, the owner is moving forward with adding more livestock and structures. And that's a concern for me. And it was a concern for the other 10 residents who showed up. But for the sake of time, the DRB said, we have our decision, we're upholding it, and, respectfully wasn't going to open up comments to 10 different residents, which I was understanding of as well. But I hope I'm clear about what's going on at 8 Taft Street.
Sounds like you are, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Annie Cooper.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
I wonder if you don't mind, this is a little is peculiar. I wonder if Carl Houghton is still in the room. If someone can let me know, is that okay to ask?
As long as you direct any conversation or questions or comments to me.
I will. I guess I appreciate that. What I want to say is I hope that Carl can hear me if he's there, and I hope that I'm being loud enough for that to happen, because I would like to say something that I think would, on the heels of. Anyway, I should be there in person if I want to solve that. So let's just let it go. Thanks.
Just so we're clear, this isn't a conversation with members of the public
Nope.
in the room. This is strictly comments to the board. So
Sure. But hearing each other speak is a very integral piece of being in community, Raj.
yep, that's great. Understood.
I appreciate that. I feel that Carl has brought so many pieces that I came to speak about as well to light, that I appreciate and value what I did hear Carl Houghton say. I have been talking about the senior center for a very long time, as you all know. I've been in email exchanges with all 5 of you at the board, with our manager, with Lori Houghton and Karen Dolan, and I've been adamantly opposed to the way that the senior center is being handled. I was happy to see Carl Houghton at the meeting that Brad spoke at, because I do feel very frustrated that we are not putting effort in where we should. Brad Luck has a total recreation budget of $4,589,000. I'm sorry, I just lost my note. Just give me 1 second. I have notes so that I don't overtalk. Brad Luck has a total recreation budget of $4,589,033. How is it possible they can't afford to staff those few hours per week or send someone over? The volume of staff within the city, as well as directly within the rec department, is pretty high, especially now. How can we not accommodate those few hours where we might close because a volunteer is not there? 2 of our recreation department staff who are full-time have been handed a second job paid within the city on top of the full-time recreation department job they already have with benefits. Sorry, the first job has benefits, the second one is not full-time. What I'm bringing that up for is not because that's a problem for me so much as how is it that we can do that, but we cannot offer our seniors the bare minimum of ensuring that the hours that we have assigned for that doesn't have a way for them to be there that doesn't involve a volunteer. It is the least that we can do, considering that we have removed the van and that we are creating upheaval in the life of people who deserve and value this time they spend together. One of the biggest delights in my life of being a part of Essex Junction is that space we give to children and to seniors. And at the very least, we should be able, we're smart enough, there's enough money floating around from the budget. The tax, everything that we do, there's no reason to not have this small piece. And I really ask you again, for the millionth time, I understand that somehow me trying to protect all 5 of you, I'm trying to protect you, and it's been twisted into a weird thing where I'm an enemy. You're misunderstanding, and I don't know how to help you any better than I'm trying right now. I would like you to really hear me. Take a hard look at what you're choosing to do and pay attention before something goes awry that disturbs a good, hardworking, honest person. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me this much space.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom that has anything they'd like to share? See anyone else in the room? So we will move on to what is now 5A, discussion and consideration of budget engagement options and warn to budget public hearings.
All right, so Ashley is with us. I will share the memo.
We got rid of that. For tonight. Postponed.
All right, good evening, everyone. So tonight I'm bringing an engagement schedule to you guys to look at. This is to help us to put some engagement efforts out towards the budget and getting that information out to people. So we've kind of broken the engagement schedule into 2 sections. The first is like wanting to get feedback from the residents. And the second is really education and information about the budget to the residents. We basically have broken it down from January 10th to February 28th to have that opportunity to gather feedback from the residents, mainly because we have to have the annual meeting warning finalized by February 28th so that can go to be printed on the ballot and to go print in the annual report. So we are planning on doing a couple of engagement opportunities other than the meetings that we already have, including some coffee talks and bringing back our community meal that we had in the past. And then after that February 28th date, beginning in March and going through April, we'll focus more on education and answering questions that are on the ballot. And in addition to the city council meetings, again, we'll have some coffee chats and then have some other media outreach with the Town Meeting TV, the Essex Reporter, doing radio appearances. And then the communication department's also going to do extra things, obviously, with our website, Facebook, and Front Porch Forum. And then we have an extra little thing of planning to do some recording of the department heads explaining their budget to also help educate people on the budget. And so on top of just discussion around the budget schedule, we are asking the council to set 2 public hearing dates to discuss the budget and ballot items. Those 2 dates are on the Saturday, January 27th, which is when we're planning on having the community meal, would be the first public hearing. And then the second public hearing would be held on February 28th. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the engagement schedule or hear any feedback that you guys have about that or scheduling these public hearing dates.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it. Any comments or questions from board members? And can't see Amber on there. We could add her to the screen. Anybody here? I'm sorry, Marcus. I wasn't looking.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So the first question I have, Ashley, is there is a notation here in the engagement schedule in regards to meeting with groups like seniors, apartment complexes, Rotary Club, Lions Club. Do you see this as being during the informational portion, or do you see this during the decision portion of the budget? Where do you see this being laid out in this schedule?
I would like to, obviously it's going to be up to those groups when we can come to those areas. So that's why I didn't necessarily plug them into the schedule. I'd like to get them in as soon as possible, especially with those with the senior centers and the apartment complexes, trying to work those in January and early February if we can. And then obviously the other groups, we have to go by their schedule, what they have on their agenda. So I'm trying to, like, I put them on there as other opportunities for us, but we don't have a definite schedule on that. But I've obviously would like to get it ahead so that we can get that public feedback.
Thanks. The other thing I would like to say, just a comment. I know that by our charter, we have to do one public hearing. The recommendation is 2 public hearings. I'm all for that. I prefer that. But I would also like to say that I also would prefer if both of these public hearings happen at a time when the public would be participating and changes could potentially be made. Because right now, the way this is scheduled, one would happen where the public can give input and changes can be made, but the other one's going to happen on the same day that we have to approve it. The likelihood that we're actually going to make changes at that point is going to be slim to nil. So I would like to see the February one moved to one meeting earlier, so that, again, the public hearings themselves, and I know there's other engagement points that are happening, but I would like to see at least these 2 public hearings be the type of engagement where the public can participate and changes are still possible.
I mean, the only thing I don't see anything wrong with that necessarily. We could talk about scheduling, but in any of these opportunities, especially when we're in session, they will act very much like a public hearing where anybody can come and make input. There's nothing preventing anyone from coming on any of these dates, the 10th, 24th, February 14th or 28th, to do that. That said, is there anything that would, to Marcus's suggestion, that would be a problem? I'm not trying to discount it. Just making the point for people who are listening that there's nothing prohibiting anyone from coming to any of these meetings, writing to us, calling us, and I'll add something to the writing to us portion in a minute. So the public hearing is just very much an organized, polished presentation, and then taking more feedback. But so I guess the thing that would be missing from some of those other meetings would be the presentation portion of it, where we're running through the budget piece by piece. So that would be different.
So what I'll say to that is this for consideration is the fact that, again, it's also the way that it's promoted, it's spoken about, because people could show up today and talk about these things that we just spent a whole day talking about, right? So obviously, I know that there's plenty of ways to engage, but for these 2 particular ones, because of the way that they're talked about, promoted, handled, I think it would be best if we can come out of it still being able to make some changes if necessary, because I think people will focus their attention around public hearings versus the other opportunities.
So if we did what you're suggesting and changed it to the 14th, Regina, or anyone else, and called that the public hearing and made changes to it, we'd have to have another public hearing, or would we? We probably wouldn't. Well,
There's a lot that we have to review to make sure we can do this. Between state statute requirements, our charter, how the timing works for the warnings for these public hearings. So my suggestion would be, if you wanted to make this change, it would be with some flexibility that we can ensure that can actually work with the schedule. Because there's just too many parts and pieces for me to be able to actually answer that question right now, if we can do that or we can't do that, and what impact that has on the rest of the schedule.
and an additional question for me would be, are we going to be in a position to? Because that takes a work session right away from us, because then we'll have to stop what we're doing a session early, freeze it, make our presentation, produce our materials, do some education around what we're proposing, a whole work session or 2 to 4 weeks early. And I don't know that we have that kind of time. If we want to have the work sessions that we want to have to incorporate the feedback we're trying to get throughout the process. Seeing your point, obviously, but it does mean that we freeze what we're doing early at a point that we may not be ready for.
Yeah.
We could intentionally advertise this differently and call it something different to get that engagement earlier, without changing the legal aspect of the 28th being the legal public hearing. You know, so we could start off the 14th work session with a potentially slightly more brief presentation on where we are and how we got here, for folks that showed up, and continue into our work session taking feedback. But the legal warned statutory public hearing would remain on the 28th. That's just a thought. I mean, that meets what you're trying to get to.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that compromise. Again, we're meeting it just by having the one on the 27th.
Yeah.
So we're already meeting the one statutory one that we've got. So I'm okay if we find a way to handle it differently. Again, I do want to make sure that we get that in. I would love to get that input early for as many people as possible. What I'm afraid of, as the conversation will permeate through the community, is they'll get into late, and then they'll show up at a public hearing to which they can make, I'll just put it this way, make no difference, because it's too late in the process. Because I don't know what'll bubble up as more public comment comes in, as we see the alterations from the comments, that the work that we did during that day. So, as it starts to be conversed, people will start to participate more. So, yeah.
Anyone else? No, Andrew. Amber, Scott, can we see Amber on the screen? Is that you, or is that Regina?
Regina.
It's me. Shoot. I don't know how to do it. I see her.
Unshare your.
Oh, unshare.
Well, often when we
I'll yell, Raj. If I have any comments, I'll yell. No worries.
we just miss you. Okay.
No, I'm here.
Elaine, did you have anything on this? Okay. I guess my only thing would be I'd love to see a way that we can advertise perhaps off our website for people to be able to review where we've what's been proposed that's presentable, and then send us comments in an audit in a way that they can do when they're ready. Maybe there's a Microsoft form we can link to, where we can collect comments from a link on the website, just to increase the opportunity for people to send us their thoughts.
Quick question for Ashley. Ashley, do you need a connection to the Rotary for getting on their schedule? Because I can help with that because I'm on Rotary.
Yeah, no, I'd love for you to make that connection. I do know somebody in that, but I would love to have your connection as well. I think coming from you, it might make it a little better, easier inward.
Probably not. Is it Greg? Is your connection Greg?
Yeah.
Okay. Proceed. He'll take care of it. It'll happen.
Okay.
Sorry, my second point was going to be just not committing. I don't want to speak for the other counselors, but I may not be able to attend some of these coffee chats during the day. So I'd hate to promote that these are going to be with counselors until we actually know we can schedule them on those days. So I don't know how we word that, but we all have different commitments when these are going on. So I just would hate to let people know that one of us, or more than one of us, two at max, would be there if we can. That's the only other. So potential of a form, and that scheduling detail.
I will say that I am developing the budget page that will have the schedule on there, and we do have a form already created on there, so people can give feedback. So that's a go, yes. And then as for the coffee chat meetings, I'll send out a schedule poll for you guys tomorrow, and you guys can tell me which days you can and can't attend. And then those that you can attend, Regina, Jess, and I will can man those as well.
So in terms of a recommendation, we have a motion, if people are happy at this point.
I'll make a motion to set the public hearings on the FY25 budget for Saturday, January 27, 2024, and Wednesday, February 28th, 2024.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Great, motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Great. 5B, discussion and consideration of capital program review committee policy and local option tax policy. We have Jess.
Sorry for the glare in the background. I can't get that light to move. So the Capital Committee began meeting regularly again earlier this summer. And one of the first tasks that we were given was to update the existing Capital Program Review Committee policy. So in your packet, you'll see that policy has been updated to reflect changes from village to city, any references to that in the policy, and then also just cleaning up some of the definitions of what is included in the capital, the purview of the Capital Committee. And then the other thing that we were asked to look at is the creating a local option tax policy. So this was like a 2 or 3 month long process that we went through. We polled. There was a member that polled pretty much every other community that currently has a lot to get copies of their policies or procedures or whatever documentation that they had. So we kind of took all the best parts of those policies to create the draft policy for the city of Essex Junction. Essentially, the policy just outlines that local option tax revenue will be used for capital projects. And we proposed that 25% of the annual revenue would be allocated specifically to sidewalk projects. And then knowing that this is a very new policy for the city, included language that will define a process for reviewing and updating this policy as we move through and see how it works for us and what the capital needs are over time. And then the last thing that we have been looking at is the sidewalk policy. So we did a really rough review of the policy. Staff and our engineer and Amber looked at it as well, and definitely needs some updating, but wanted to just kind of put it on the radar and have the council provide us direction on moving forward with reviewing and updating that policy, but also identifying any specific needs that the council might have.
Great, thank you. Regina, did you have anything to add to that?
I did not have anything to add other than just, so there's a bunch of items on this agenda. Right. But so really the recommendations are to accept the Capital Program Review Committee policy, to accept the local option tax revenue policy with any edits that you might have. And then the sidewalk policy, we're not asking for any action. It's just whether you want to direct either staff or the Capital Committee to look into updating that policy.
Well, let's do them one by one. Capital Program Review Committee policy. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I had a couple things on there.
Andrew.
First one, just being a general thought, not that we need to change it on this policy, but where it references a policy as defining a capital purchase of anything over $10,000, wondering if that is really the definition we want to use for our community, or whether we want to have something that might align better with like the general accepted accounting principles based upon our finance director's determination instead of just a $10,000 limit. I remember early on with the committee, one of the first things we had to do was rank a server replacement, and because it fit within that $10,000 policy, so just to prevent things going to the committee that we frankly don't really need to. might be advantageous to at some point in time redefine that. Under membership, the last sentence talks about the committee's first 5 appointees. That happened back in 2012, so this could probably be deleted as well. And then in under the membership, where the second paragraph, it says a first meeting shall be the organizational meeting. Not sure if this is also needed and or if that should be changed to be the first meeting of the year, if the annual election needs to happen.
So I agree with your second point, most of your points, and I had a question around the dollar limit, a different question, but since it's the same item, is 10,000 a relevant number now? And that kind of ties into our purchasing policy when we start talking about purchasing policies again. Those thresholds, are they realistic now with the way things are, where we are now? But I kind of like how Andrew approached it. Is a dollar amount appropriate, or is it more? What's the word I'm looking for? Is that the right way to go? Generally.
We'll acknowledge on that particular point later on in the local option tax revenue policy. It is specified even more so to say roads, bridges, culverts, sidewalks, and water lines. So maybe, I don't know if that's the appropriate language or not, but obviously we have it somewhere else where it's being used.
And on that note, we excluded bridges, we excluded buildings, but further down in that paragraph, we bring them back in. So I want to make sure I'm clear on, they don't examine buildings, but we're having them examine building repairs or replacements.
And
So I just want to understand the nuance there for me. Sorry, yeah.
The original intent.
That was an error. I caught that as well.
Okay.
That the not deleting and building repairs or replacements in line and the first paragraph was an error. The intention is not to include those in capital and for review.
Excellent.
Nor have they ever.
Okay, just perfect. Anyone else? All right.
Right.
All right. So based on that feedback,
Raj, I had one comment. Sorry.
Sorry, Amber.
Sorry. So I did review this, but then I caught on the 14th time back around here on the second page about quarterly reports. I'm just wondering if we really need this language in there because we have been getting actual meeting minutes in the packet. And I think the way that this written is quarterly reports will be provided. I think that really ties it too much that I may be provided if we feel we need to put this in here, but I don't want to put will. I prefer to just take it out because I think we have the minutes in the packet, and I don't think we need this language. Not to mention, you're always going to have a counselor that's sitting on this committee that you can get an update from.
And these documents will be very much live, so if anything changes, they'll be reflected in the updated documents that we'll all have, and they'll be online, so they will change fairly infrequently. I'm comfortable with having that gone, having that removed, personally. Great, everybody seems in line with that. So with those changes, I mean, I guess there's the open question to the amount. Does that, you know, did you have a suggested change more specifically, Andrew, or?
I was having something to be aligned with something determined by the finance director. The finance director will have the professional expertise to determine what is a capital expense versus what is not, just based on their own knowledge, instead of a dollar amount. I don't know if maybe Jess wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Jess, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to, like Andrew was referencing, aligning it with the purchasing policy. And maybe in this policy, we just reference the threshold in the purchasing policy so that we're not updating this policy every time we make an update to the purchasing policy. my thought originally was that we could raise that to either the $20,000 or $40,000 threshold. So 20,000 is the threshold in which Regina has purview to purchase. 40,000 is the threshold in which purchases would need to be approved by the council. I think with costs being what they are in this day, 40,000 seems reasonable. There's not going to be a capital project that comes in under that amount. But I wasn't sure if we wanted to just use the $20,000 limit to maybe capture some of those. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for the most part for these projects. So I think 40,000 is plenty. We may actually want it to be higher than that, honestly.
I mean, I guess I'm comfortable. I mean, we describe what they review in the first sentence. And I'm comfortable adding something instead of an amount to say in alignment with our purchasing policies, and leave it simple. And when we update the purchasing policies this year, next year, and we, like you say, Jess, we don't have to come back and adjust this. Because we're looking at 2013 amounts anyway here, which are vastly different. So what do we think about that? Amber, you good?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So in terms of revisiting this, or approving it as amended, that's more of a question for Regina in terms of how comfortable you are with understanding what we're doing and what we're proposing.
I think I have everything clear. So in paragraph 1, we're swapping out the language of defining $10,000 or more with, don't have this exact, but we fit in there in alignment with our purchasing policies.
Okay.
I'm clear under membership how to change the second paragraph, the first meeting shall, because we're beyond that. But I miss what Andrew said in the paragraph above that, which sentence we're looking at.
Oh, the last sentence of the first paragraph.
Where it says committee's first appointees will be appointed.
Yes. Okay. So I'm clear on that. And then I was a little bit unclear whether buildings need to be addressed in this policy, or we're only talking about buildings being corrected in the lot policy. I can make sure it's in this one too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll make sure that buildings are not under the purview of the capital plan review committee in this policy. And we will also remove quarterly reports from the top-ish of page 2.
Well, then I'm comfortable approving as amended tonight, if folks are. So I would entertain the motion on agenda or packet page 10. Nope, that's wrong. That's wrong. Page 8, the first recommendation.
I'll go ahead and move that the council adopt the updated capital program review committee policy as amended.
I'll second.
Great. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, could you remove?
I will retract my motion.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We will do these one at a time. Sorry, folks in the public who may be online watching. Is there anyone on Zoom or in person who has any comments about what we just discussed or anything they'd like to add? I am not seeing any hands up. So we will move on. Andrew, I'm sorry about that.
Just rewind to say motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Andrew moves, Lane seconds, no discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Aye.
No nays. The motion passes. That's the first one. Thank you very much. All right, the lot policy, which is page 11. And Jess, did you have anything you wanted to say about this to get us going, or specific?
Yeah, I think specifically it's like I said, we just defined this as the revenue being directed towards capital projects, with that specific call out of 25% directed towards sidewalk projects. And then I just noticed the capital projects do not include section. We're trying to remove the use of the word sewer and put wastewater. So I would suggest that we change sewer to wastewater / sanitation in there.
Okay. Any comments from the board on this policy?
One question about language.
Sure.
Capital projects do not include the following: paving. Specifically for paving, and I'm curious about this because, and I know that our sidewalk policy, which we haven't gotten to yet, doesn't talk about materials. And I know that recently came up in discussion around the
West Street.
West Street, the project there. And I would assume that in future projects, there will be discussion about what types of materials to be used. I don't know if it matters that this says paving, if it matters in a discussion around sidewalks, or if we're talking about roads, or if it needs to be, this paving is specific to specifically roads, so therefore it should say roads.
Well, I mean, I'll just speak to that, Marcus. I mean, I think, and you know this, the position of our engineer and our public works department is that we are not paving. We are putting down concrete. We're not using asphalt on sidewalks. And so I will only speak for myself. When I drafted this, I meant paving. So I meant streets, but I don't think that it applies to sidewalks either, based on the practice. So I mean, I'm happy for if you want to put in a change to that to say paving of streets, that's fine. But I don't think that there was any intention for there to be paving of sidewalks included in this. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if the language change is absolutely necessary or not. I want to make sure that it's clear from reading that what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in my mind, the distinction really is just a normal maintenance paving that we do annually, which may be, the majority of the time will be streets, might be sidewalks on occasion.
Okay.
The capital projects we are ripping it up and repaving it and potentially doing other things along with it. So maybe it could just say routine paving maintenance or something is what's not included.
Well, I think there is paving. Wait a minute, let me think about that. Because some of these, where I'm thinking is some of these projects do have paving as a component, because you're ripping up whatever it happens to be the street and then you have to pave it, but I guess it's not routine.
You could say, does not include annual paving as prescribed in the annual budget process or something like that.
Yeah.
Just non-capital. Obviously, if we're ripping up a culvert, we're paving to cover it back up. But just does not include routine paving, street paving. Because if it's a project where the culvert's, it's not routine, so that works.
I like routine street paving.
Okay, great. Everybody likes routine street paving.
It's a good concept.
It looks good.
Feels smooth.
Followed by
As a
routine,
practice.
followed by routine street striping.
Yes.
Clean.
Depends on the street though.
Ricky loves it. We should also align the definitions that we just talked about from the capital policy. Because this first, under definitions, this also says that exceed $10,000. So we need to align that. And I'm going to throw a little wrench in Amber's work here. I think she knows I'm going to do it, but I understand the need to address sidewalks specifically. I would like us to consider for a moment, notwithstanding what I said at the beginning of the meeting, that we maybe broaden that a little bit to include pedestrian or bike infrastructure projects, because often these go together. So I don't know if, because that, you know, if we're doing, I'd hate to see us bypass an opportunity that might present itself when we improve a sidewalk or install a sidewalk, but we didn't include the funding because it's for the sidewalk, and we'd have to score the crosswalk or the bike lane enlargement or whatever. I'm just spitballing here, but there will be other potentially add-on things that we can do to improve accessibility in an area. But if we're pigeonholed into just using this money for sidewalks specifically, we may not be able to make those other improvements. So I don't know if that's, yeah, go ahead.
I thought that the purpose of the 25% set aside for sidewalks was predominantly for sidewalk repair. And so I would think that if we were to have an opportunity to also take on bike lane expansion or sidewalk, crosswalk expansion, that's not sidewalks. And so could that portion of a project be from the capital plan, and the 25% from the lot is for sidewalks?
I mean, as long as we adjust the scoring on it, because if we have to wait 6 years hence, because that's where it's scored, but we're actually touching the area by the sidewalk repair, that, and we could have, and I can't think of a specific example, so I apologize, then we might lose an opportunity for efficiency or to make a bigger improvement with just a little more effort. Now, again, I can't think of an area. Well, I actually can think of an area, and I'm, you know, now that I think about it, the sidewalk between Willie's, I think it's Willie's Court, and the Jug Handle, West Street Extension, scored among the worst, especially as you approach Warner. And there has been talk about making an improvement across Pearl Street now. So
It
if
doesn't bear
there,
up to traffic studies, so that's been a years-long conversation.
well, that needs to be redone because South Burlington just did it, but that's a whole nother argument.
I'm just
But
trying to say.
so I wonder if it makes sense.
I thought that the purpose of setting aside in the lot revenue was specifically for sidewalk repair, because we wanted to be attentive to the things that residents were calling out needing repair on, and that we would be able to use this funding to do those spot repairs with the intention of not making them expansions into other things, but to fix the sidewalk.
Okay.
That's just my understanding.
I'm totally fine with that. I just wanted to bring it up. So
I will just caution too that 25% is basically, we started at like 20%. And, you know, and I actually started at a dollar amount looking at the CCRPC study and using this figure that the engineer provided for us for per linear square foot that we would be calculating. And I was thinking it's going to cost 200 grand plus to be able to do any dent in anything for sidewalks. So I would just caution that if we start dipping into that 25% to do other things, that we might not have the ability to do the sidewalk that you intended to do. Keeping in mind that the lot policy does allow you to continue to use the lot money for capital projects. It's just allocating 25% specifically for sidewalks. So you still have 75% each year to spend on other capital projects, which could be your pedestrian side stuff.
then I'll drop it. That's totally fine. Anything else? No? So aligning the definitions changing sewer to wastewater and sanitation. Is there anything else?
I have making sure there's no building reference in here, change sewer to wastewater sanitation. Under the do not include portion, change paving to routine street paving. Change 10,000, the language around $10,000 to alignment with our purchasing policies, and that's it.
Sounds
I
complete.
thought the reference to buildings in this was to say that buildings are not included. You want to remove that?
We do want to keep the buildings portion to not
In
be
this-
included in here.
Yeah.
It's to make sure that it's only as a not.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will clarify the lot policy also that buildings do not come under the purview of capital.
Right.
Or the lot, really, in this instance.
Okay. That sounds complete to me. All right, so there is a motion on page 8, the second motion. Sorry. Oh, thank you, gosh. Are there any members of the public? There's no one in the room, so anyone on Zoom that has any comments that they'd like to make on this before we proceed? Please raise your hand. Another couple seconds. Not seeing anyone raising their hand, so if someone would like to make the motion on page 8 under number 2.
I'll move the city council accept the local option tax revenue policy with suggested council edits.
I'll second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those-
Aye.
Motion passes. Great. On to discuss the sidewalk policy and more specifically, whether we want capital or staff to revise it and review it. Review and revise. I will start off by suggesting that it would be fantastic for staff to review and offer suggested revisions as a starting point. Amber, you have your hand up?
I was actually going to say that I think this kind of starts at the maybe at the staff level and telling us what the current practice policy is, you know, out there in the real world, and then bring that information back to the council, and then the council needs to make a decision as to whether the policy moving forward is to proceed with removing sidewalks and such as outlined in here. I don't think that the policy needs to be either confirmed or changed before it should go to the capital committee because they're not making policy decisions.
Yep. That sounds great.
If I could make a note
Sure.
regarding the removal of sidewalks, I think back in the day, there was a financial decision regarding plowing to lower some numbers of sidewalks to 1 on given streets to reduce the amount of plowing we were doing. And there was a lot of neighborhood outcry about that. I don't know if the snow plowing plan is a part of this anymore, but just seemed inadvisable to me at the time. And just a comment about one of the criteria for removing sidewalks in this policy is sidewalk conditions become unsafe or are not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And my thinking is if the sidewalk's not compliant, you're not going to remove it and make it even less compliant. You're going to repair it and make it more compliant. So I would love that, especially that removal of sidewalks part, to really be examined. I think we want accessibility, more walkability, not less.
To that being, I thought that was suggesting the point at which if the sidewalk exists and let's just say therefore it's a roadway that's got 2 sidewalks and it's planned for removal, that one of them is going to be removed, it would happen at the time that it doesn't comply.
I see.
So I didn't read it as you can't use it, we're going to just remove it.
Yeah, that's what it looked.
I thought it was
to me,
just
that's
a matter of
what
what would trigger
Yeah.
it being removed versus us being proactive, just starting to remove sidewalks.
That's probably more in line with what was intended, Marcus. To me, that's not how it reads at all. So, yeah.
I can understand.
And I think in light of the latest LDC revisions and potential revisions to come in the years to come, that I think in the TOD study it's in the reading file. I think it's a great time to revisit this.
Yep.
Also, looking at the plowing policy, it'd be great to look at that. Does that then line up with this? And kind of treat them both as one effort. So as Amber said, reviewing best practices, where are we, what are the recommendations, and bringing that back here.
But I agree with Amber's staff first.
Yes.
And yeah.
The only thing I'd like to add, if I may, we did talk about this some years ago, and there was a directive to staff about doing a pause on any sidewalk removal until we were to revisit this policy. It's been a while. Staff have changed over. Maybe just a general, let's not remove the sidewalk and have there be a general pause on this, and intentionally not follow the policy as it's written. If that determination comes up where there is a sidewalk that is scheduled to be removed, to not actually remove it for now.
I would agree with that. Continuing the pause sounds great.
Yeah, and I did get some feedback from Ricky today. This is not a full 100% inventory, it's off his head. That there's only been 2 that he's aware of from this list that have actually been removed. So that was helpful info. But
There are 4 marked on here. I mean, there was 2 from FY07, 1 from FY08, another one from FY10. I assume those have been removed.
North side of Briar was removed, as was another one.
So we've got an email from Regina with the 2, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they are.
yeah, same.
I would love to see too, I guess this is just my former history on Bike Walk, but if there's a role or any participation from the Bike Walk committee, if that's feasible and efficient, for them to have a role in this somehow. And I don't know if they've actually had a chance to review the GIS information that we got 3 or 4 months ago, or if they're even aware of it.
They're definitely aware of it.
Okay.
I believe they've taken a look.
Awesome, great. Couldn't remember off the top of my head from the minutes. Great.
Orchard Terrace is the other
Okay.
2. Briar Lane and Orchard Terrace. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Is that what you need?
I think we've got what we need. Yeah.
Awesome, great. All right. Anyone online have any comments they'd like to make on that? We're not taking any action, but if there's anything anybody would like to share around that topic, now's the time. There's no one in the room, so I'm not seeing any hands online, so we'll move on to 5C, discussion and consideration of rental registry and inspection ordinance and potential warrant of public hearing. Chris, welcome, Chris.
Okay. Before I pull that up, just gonna intro this. We've talked a little bit about this before. A state statute changed, and the Division of Fire Safety is taking over rental inspections from the Department of Health. They have been creating some rulemaking to make that happen by December 31st of this year. We got some advice from both of those departments before that what we're doing probably can still move forward. As of today, some of that has been solidified and we now have some questions. It is unlikely that we can get some of those questions answered by January 24th, but really the changes, we're not thinking that this is like we're completely derailed. Thinking is at the moment, we aren't talking about staffing this position with a certified fire person. That may potentially change. And if so, that's probably going to change the cost of the program because there might be a higher pay scale there that we have to be thinking about. But we're thinking that it likely makes sense to move forward. The discussions that you folks have on your memo tonight are all still relevant policy conversations and questions for this program. And it seems to make sense from Chris and I's perspective that there's no harm in moving forward with the public hearing on January 24th if you folks are ready for it, because we're just going to get the word out there and get some feedback. Anything else to add? I was supposed to say in the intro.
No, I think that's that's right.
Any questions on that before Chris goes into the memo?
So at this point, we're warning a public hearing. There might be some edits by then, potentially. But we feel like the way the rulemaking is going, we're on the right path.
Yes.
Or an appropriate path that meets the standards.
Yeah. And I think there's, the waters are just murky, I will say. And we will do our best to clarify that by January 24th. I imagine we're going to be a little bit in the middle of what the Division of Fire Safety thinks we can do versus what we think we can do, and how to kind of write all of that correctly. I can envision a situation where we don't have that all fine-tuned by January 24th. But I think in terms of us moving forward with this as a policy, I don't really see a reason right now that we should pause this process.
Okay.
If that makes
We just have to remain flexible.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I would also mention that after January 24th, it's very likely and almost certain that there'll need to be another public hearing with additional amendments.
We'll probably talk about that when we talk about timeline. Okay.
So if we do have to have another public hearing anticipating amendments, what would be the difficulty in just waiting until we can have this flushed out?
I mean, we could shorten the conversation tonight and ask our questions based on what we've read, unless there's something, I'm not trying to cut it short, but unless there's something that you really want us to focus on. Do you, like, for instance, Chris, do you have pressing questions of us from a policy point of view? I know there's a few of us questions.
All of the discussion points in the memo are still valid. I don't anticipate that the rulemaking at the Division of Fire Safety will have any impact on that discussion. So to be able to solidify what that is would be helpful.
Okay.
In terms of why we still think January 24th is still a good day. I mean, it's partly because there's the council agenda anticipated in the meetings after that show that they'll likely be focused on the budget.
Right.
It will definitely delay us.
Yeah.
If we don't do January 24th. We might not have to delay if we go with January 24th. If that makes sense. If I just said those, I meant Tuesdays.
Well, let's proceed tonight as you intended, and we'll just keep going. So, did you want to run us through any of this, or did you want to take questions?
I think I'll take questions.
Okay. Anyone here have any questions for Chris at this point? Andrew, you want to start us off?
I have a couple questions. The first one of exempting affordable housing units. I know that Barrie, St. Albans City, and St. John's Barrie do not do this. Not sure if other communities do. So just not sure why we would. Speaking from a previous profession, an organization I worked for when we did housing development, and the organizations who then did the property management appreciated having another opportunity to have somebody come into tenants' units with a different perspective, especially because there are times where there were tenants who would not allow the state government in, who would not allow the federal government in, but felt more comfortable with the local government coming in. And so it was another opportunity then that could align all of those inspections into one. So there is a fair amount of collaboration that does happen on those inspections. And there was some utility in keeping somebody else having an eyes on those units. So I would advocate that we not exempt it.
And part of that was because of the anticipated impacts of the costs to them. It doesn't mean that we would have to charge them if we feel strongly that the city should be inspecting those as well. But I do think the additional annual costs could be difficult for some nonprofits housing providers.
Tell you from that experience that those are not a barrier. The $120 a unit is peanuts.
And do they pass it on to their tenants?
More often than not, there's a governmental entity that pays for it.
Okay.
That's just one developer, one organization. It is a giant spider web mess of organizations. So I'm not speaking broadly for all affordable housing developers or property managers. I want to be very clear on that.
But also that, we know that some of the affordable units in our community are some of the ones that are the most affected by the need of inspection and quality of housing. And I wouldn't want to miss that opportunity to require improvement where it's needed. Because if a federal or a state entity inspects, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to know about it and that we're going to find out whether the requirements are being met. So if we require them, we have some authority to make sure they're being met.
And it's our staff that has to, at the end of the day, interact for any anything that needs to be addressed or any violations. It would be our staff that is the other folks who are actually in that situation. Not. I mean, I'm curious about, there's some programs up there. We've just adjusted the LDC to encourage or make possible ADUs, for instance. And there are some programs out there that private homeowners can take advantage of if they're willing to keep the rent low enough that they can get, I don't remember the terms, but I know I looked into it. And that would be, that's against an affordability threshold that is the standard. So I guess I would wonder, is there a middle ground? I mean, that is only one person, one ADU, 120 a year. But I'm just wondering if there's an appetite there to, exempt. Yeah, that was one of the things I was wondering about. I didn't have that perspective, though, that you're bringing to this with, like, if a Champlain Housing Trust, for instance, put in 25 units somewhere, they're used to dealing with that. But if a private developer came forward and decided they're going to take advantage of some of the new aspects of S100 and they're going to put an extra story on, they're going to commit to a certain percentage, or this ADU example, or somebody's going to do something in their home, what's the middle ground there that we can encourage that? Can we absorb still inspecting them so there are standards? And should we, or do we want to waive those fees or discount them?
Well, so I would clarify that the current proposal only offers a fee exemption for affordable housing units that are already inspected by another agency.
Okay.
So
Right.
basically, if someone builds, the affordable units for a height bonus under Act 47, that's not inspected by anybody else, and they would still be subject to this.
The only other portion with that definition, though, is so the housing choice voucher or Section 8 follows a person. And so there are many instances where you have a person who qualifies for subsidized housing. It's in a private development, a private unit in and of itself, even in owner-occupied developments within an accessory dwelling unit. And so it's affordable and would then be an affordable opportunity, but to know where that person is not something that you're going to generally have access to that kind of information, because that goes to the landlord and that individual. They would have to self-identify that, yes, I'm getting money through the Section 8 program or through the housing choice voucher. So it's not all big developments, 60, 50 units, it's even individual units.
The ordinance, the draft ordinance right now doesn't really distinguish whether renters are low income or not. This is just if the unit is already inspected by another agency, then it's exempted.
So I guess what we're doing is enlarging the conversation, or I am enlarging the conversation to say, do we want to add, is there another classification that we want to add to it? And it doesn't sound like folks are on board with that, so that's totally fine. I don't think the fees are exorbitant. I just want to bring it up.
For clarification, because I know, and I agree with the thoughts that have already been shared concerning those things that qualify as affordable or low-income housing. There is the exemption in here as well for the owner-occupied units, not ADUs, but owner-occupied units. I am for that particular stipulation in here, and I think the staff has given valid reasoning in here. So I just wanted to check in since we are having this exemption conversation. Maybe we still feel that's okay?
Yep.
Okay.
So Amber noticed there was an issue with that. I had mentioned that exemption in the memo, but the language in the draft ordinance was not actually reflective of that. So that is an amendment that would need to be made and added. But just to clarify, what language would be potentially added for that, it would be under the registry required part, section 20.01. There would be an addition that says owner-occupied dwelling units containing 1 or 2 rooms which are rented out for compensation, and partial unit short-term rentals are exempted from the requirements of this chapter. That language came from the city of Burlington, and I think that kind of contains it so that if you happen to have a rooming house situation where you have 15 rooms, but you own it, it would still be subject to inspection. But if it's a typical single family house with where you rent out 1 or 2 rooms, maybe for home share, that would be exempted.
Okay. I had a detail in the definitions right at the top. Trying to find it. Article 3 definitions: building inspector shall mean the duly appointed building inspector of the city or his or her designated assistant. Can we remove his or her and use their? I think that's the only instance throughout the whole thing where that sort of exists.
I think that should be fine. I would double check with the city attorney just to see if there's any issue with that, but I don't anticipate any issue.
Great, thank you. Amber, sorry, I wasn't looking up.
I just put it up, so no worries. In section 20.06 C, just a addition of adding city of Essex Junction Fire Department as opposed to Essex Fire Department. It's minor, I know. And then on section 20.08, the D and E, I think there was some conversation about this at the last council meeting that we discussed this, that there was some redundancy in those, and I won't wordsmith it, Chris, but if you can kind of take a look at those two sections again, just to see if there's any way to clean them up so that they're not redundant and clear.
I'll take a look again. Those this was something I'd run by the city attorney already, and see, at least they didn't notice any issues or redundancy with that. So they had other comments about those paragraphs which have been already addressed.
Okay.
Yeah.
It read just, I don't know, not clear to me, but I'm an attorney, so who am I to say?
No, you keep telling us.
Last quick comment, I think, for me, and then I have a question on the proposed fee schedule. Still reflects the 115, not the 120.
That is, yeah, that should be updated to
Okay.
120. Yeah.
And then this is a silly question, but just so that I'm clear. So if I have a rental property, I'm going to pay $120 a year to register it with the city, and then you're going to come out and inspect, but you're going to re-inspect as part of my 120 that I'm paying. Hypothetically, I know you're not inspecting every year, but if I have any violations and they're not remedied in 30 days or whatever, and you have to come back out for another inspection, then I'm paying another $120 or 115 or whatever it is. Is that right? So the inspection itself, said a different way, the inspection itself, the first inspection is essentially covered by the registration fee. You're not paying separately for an inspection unless it's a re-inspection.
Right. Actually, and re-inspection, even if it's if the issue is remedied within 90 days, would not come with a fee. That's the intention was that, you know, if it's a repeat issue that just doesn't get resolved, that the city would recuperate the cost of that. I think the intention was not to be was not to penalize excessively, but to just get issues addressed.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, I'm not sure that maybe the 90 days is open for conversation. On a standard fire safety, they give you 30 days. So fire safety meaning, sorry, when the fire marshal comes and inspects your property, they give you 30 days to remedy any of the deficiencies. So that's standard. I mean, obviously there is the, hey, I can't do this. Can we, you know, move that to 45 days or 60 days or whatever it happens to be. So I'm open to conversation about that, but I was more curious. I just wanted to make sure I understood the fee process.
You want your candy, get outside now.
Just dancing away.
Folks at home, we're listening to what we think is the candy drop off from the fire department roll by outside, and they're playing music very loudly, so Elaine's going to start dancing.
Mariah Carey's rocking it right now.
Amber, are you all set with those questions?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm missing the whole candy drop thing, but I'm good.
So are we, though.
It's okay.
We have a couple other things.
Go ahead.
Within the objectives, the first one says, A, to ensure the adequate life and safety of all residential rental properties. In my mind, I would want to replace rental properties with renters. My objective for advocating this for as long as I have is not to advocate for the properties, but for the people living there. Might be semantics, but
rental properties don't have a life, so
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Sure.
and then the last thing that I have is not on the document, but then on the next step in process. We're ready for that.
Well, I just want to, just give me 1 second, because I just want to make sure, since it's budget season, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think there's a little wiggle room because there's some one-time purchasing happening in the first year. But this is going to, our costs are going to increase at least 3 to 5% every year in this program. So what is our mechanism, or what do we want to address a mechanism to increase these fees a couple questions. Do we want to come up with a way, or is that a separate conversation for addressing fee increases? How regularly? Or is that just something we need to keep in mind? Because this, if I use the salary and benefits that were presented in November at 97, 98, we'd be after 5 years up in the 120s for that person at 5% every year. So I just want to be, and I didn't go backwards then and take out the one-time purchases and all that stuff. I didn't kind of go through the spreadsheet, but I just want to make sure we're understanding that these fees will have to go up at some point. And I just thought I'd mention that because it's on my mind. I don't know what the procedure would be. I mean, we just probably come back and raise them as part of the budget process. Inflation this year was X. We're raising the rate 3% this year. We're gonna do that with some of these things. That's a larger conversation that Amber really wants to have with revenues generally. Do we do that? How often do we come back to our fees regularly and increase them? Because you could do that across the board. Any kind of community development work costs more for the city to do every year. So do we raise the fees every year? Is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 3-year plan? It's just something I think.
I would be in favor of giving staff the ability to determine the fee based on the cost of the program and not having it wait until it comes to this body to then approve of through a political process, but rather have the staff who see the budget know, we're not meeting the cost, we want to raise it, inform the council.
I think there is a policy participation though on us to set a floor. Because we do. Not listed in this objective would be to then return any of these resources that might be in surplus to improve our housing stock generally, and do what some other communities are doing with proactively reach out to landlords and say, how can we help you improve? If there's this is years down the road, but if there's surplus to this program, are there zero interest loans we can give a landlord to help them improve a property or even add, or any of those kinds of. So I guess there'd be a floor, but. I think it's not something we have to come up with tonight. I just wanted to bring it up more generally around the revenues and how this works, because it does worry me adding something and then finding that we're not keeping up. That's all.
We also, when we approved the land development code last time, we specifically took the fee schedule out of the land development code so it lives on its own. Mm-hmm. So it's not within the document that requires a significant amount of process to update. So we could also not include the cost in the ordinance itself, keep it over on that fee schedule, because the idea was that can just be brought to council whenever.
And, I think I saw that in Winooski and South Burlington. Maybe South Burlington's not correct, but they have a whole separate addendum to their policy page, appendix, which is their fee schedule for everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great plan.
That's already actually the draft.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments for Chris? Anyone? Next steps.
Process.
Right.
We're ready for that.
Yep. Sorry, we are. Yes, sir.
All good. So I see that there's a desire to send a notice to landlords to tell them that we are doing this. In my mind, there's another population here, and that would be the tenants. And so if we're going to send something to landlords, why would we not also send something to tenants? Just take a further step back, when we had the vicious dog ordinance that we created, we didn't send something to registered dog owners to tell them we're going to do this and we want your input. So I know we want public input. I would say if we're going to ask for public input by sending a letter to any bodies, that it should be both sets of the equation, landlords and tenants, or we just create the equal playing field and do our typical notifications that way.
So I could be wrong, but I think that was staff's suggestion last time we talked about this, to send it to both. And there was council direction that we're doing this to benefit all parties, and do we need to do any outreach at all in this above and beyond what we're doing otherwise? I think our feeling is that it'd be easier to implement and put this forward if we're notifying than not notifying. And it's the impact in terms of laying this out is more on the landlord community than the renter community in terms of a hardship. But I hear what you're saying, and it's a great question.
Well, I wonder in that process, I do recall some of that, but if we end up doing it, including something in that asks or requests, can't require, landlords provide something to their tenants, if that's going to happen. But I see your point, but I do recall us saying, I don't know that we need to do that generally. But, not sure we could change our minds. What do people think?
I'm thinking, well, yes, we absolutely should notify both parties, but I'm also anticipating that most of those parties are not watching these meetings, and it's going to be a big surprise that there's going to be a fee, and we're going to hear from landlords who don't like it, and we're going to hear from tenants who are scared that it's going to be passed on directly to them, and it most likely will be. And so I wouldn't say that reaching out to the landlords is they're the impacted people, because I think the landlords are going to turn around and pass it right on to their renters. So we need to be prepared to talk to people about why we're doing this from a public information perspective. So not just notifying by letter who lives in these buildings and who owns these buildings, but rather informing the entire community why we're doing this and our anticipated outcome of it. And yes, we acknowledge that this is an increased cost, but this is this is an opportunity for us to improve the housing stock in Essex Junction. So I think it's more of a community information piece as well as notifying both the landlord and the tenant, because we are going to get people in the audience after those letters go out.
I agree with the land. I will say this, to take it a step further, having been in the seat of being a renter, I could only imagine getting one of these letters. That would be one of the first things I would think. But at the same time, if my lease was up and my landlord said, by the way, your rent is going up $200 because of this rental registry, and I have to go, why? Because it's only costing you $10 a month. Like, why is it going up $200? This gives the renters that foreknowledge so that they can be proactive in those particular discussions with their landlords. The other is, it also lets them know that this program exists, so that if they have problems with their units,
Yes.
that they will know that there's a mechanism there that somebody they can call.
So
and
new
try to get
accountability
this-
that doesn't exist yet.
Correct. So I would agree that this communication should go to both.
I wonder if the conversation before, and I'd have to go back and look, but I think there's a little nuance here. I don't think that we want to wait. I don't think that we wanted to wait the extra time in the process to have we're sending this out 6 weeks later for this meeting, come and join us. I think that was sort of what we were trying to, we're going to do this. Here are the dates we're going to talk about it. Please come in and share your thoughts. As opposed to taking one or two extra steps to get feedback, give it another couple meetings of consideration, and that sort of thing. I think we're committed to how this works. It's been done in other communities. We've had feedback that this happens and people know about it and how they work. We're not doing anything vastly different than what other communities have done. So I think that might be all of this has been discussed before. I think that's kind of where we ended up. So does that make sense?
There would probably be two steps to it. I think it would make sense to reach out before the ordinance is passed, so that they can provide feedback, so that they feel included in the process. But also, we'll have to reach out again with the registration information, and the link to actually participate. And reaching out twice, I anticipate would increase compliance much higher than if we just sprung it on them once. So, in terms of reaching out to the renters, does it make sense to reach out to them now when things are not so finalized and some things are still in flux, or should it? But they would have a chance to shape the ordinance, or should it be more notification that said this program exists, please take advantage of it, and it starts on this date?
I think it equalizes a power imbalance if you send it to everybody as compared to just the people who own the home.
I guess the question now is timing, though. So when, after it's passed and that's about to be implemented, hey, here's a heads up, there's this program and there's going to be inspections, and by the way, this is also how you reach, it's the same department that does health code violation and concerns and all that stuff. Or do we reach out to the both now and both again?
Well, couldn't we reach out to them as part of the public hearing process, which is before it's enacted, to say, we're having a public hearing, and that's the whole point of the public hearing, is to hear from the public who are impacted by what we're about to implement. So give them the heads up with the public hearing and say, here is your opportunity to come talk to us about this, or you can email, or you can call. And then once it's enacted, this program is now in place. And I think we should be taking a proactive tone and saying, the purpose of this is to protect our renters. And we want to make sure you have recourse when things are going wrong in your building, and you now have someplace you can call, and we will be holding landlords accountable, and here's some resources for you. That's like what Andrew said earlier, changing that one little piece of the introduction to say, we're trying to protect people. And so, dear renters, we're doing this for you, and we're doing it for all the housing stock in our community.
Right. So it sounds like we're saying we want 2 mailers to each, which feels different than before, which is okay.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. It's very costly.
Well, can one be like a postcard, like
Yeah,
the hearing one?
costly.
Oh, sure, but
Yeah.
That's why I was originally advocating just don't do it, so that
Yeah.
way we can go through the process as cost effectively as possible. If we're going to do it, then equalize it for everybody.
Yeah, right. One way or the other. We're either mailing
Do it to everybody, or just don't do
everybody,
it.
or we're not mailing.
Right.
And
We're
we're
gonna-
getting the word out as best we can through all other mechanisms that we get the word out.
How does this, this seems like, where does it fall in the rubric we approved 3 months ago? So, if this, we have the communications project rubric. If this warrants the expense of doing that, that's something we've approved and we've said this is what we want to do. I would let that guide us on this. We are going to do one mailing to both if this gets approved. Regardless, I think we've kind of established that should be done. Let people know it's coming. Got to mail registration materials out to landlords anyway and get compliance. I don't disagree with you, Chris, that working with them will get more compliance than springing it on them. But I would guess I would go back to the rubric and say, this seems to me like it's a big enough decision where it might fall further down that line of effort we put into getting out the word. So I guess let us know. We're not going to pull it up now, but let us know what you think. How does that feel? Confusing, or is that?
I think it seems clear to me.
Because it doesn't quite to me, but I just don't want it. So I just don't want us to turn around in a month and say, well, we approved it, because it just occurred to me that we did do that, and this is sort of we did approve that rubric and that process, and we have to use it. So
Yes.
we
Yeah, and that's true, and I agree with that. I'm just pointing out that we have not created a budget
right.
that really truly does that well, because to
Right.
do these things well costs a lot of money.
Right.
So just
Yeah.
pointing that out, that we don't necessarily have these dollars sitting someplace to make
do
this
that.
happen.
Okay.
So fortunately for us, we are at the, the midpoint of our budget discussions. And so maybe a future workshop discussion point is like, what are the major things we're going to be doing in the next fiscal year that we are going to have to notify people about? Because we did pass that rubric, and the whole point of it was to do a better job of communicating. And if we simply notify the public hearing by putting up some posters at Brown Allen and Lincoln Hall and one or two other places, no one's going to see that. And they'll be blindsided by this $120 cost that will be passed on to them.
So we're going to come back to this before we have to mail. Will we? No, we won't, because if we're talking about the public hearing, we have to get that right out.
Unless you delay the public hearing.
No, we don't want to delay the public hearing. What kind of costs are we talking about? It's in the, I've actually got it, I think. I've got the suggested from the November 8th meeting.
If you do the public hearing notice as a postcard, it saves a little bit, not much.
$92. Printing and postage was $290 from landlords.
Right.
And there will be more
So
tenants by
about 2,000 something tenants.
Yeah. And this was that $200 basic, $300 basically is 279 landlords versus 2,000 tenants. So if you extrapolate that out, it's probably $1,000 in printing and $1,200 in printing and mailing. Just guessing. I mean, times two if we do it twice. So,
In the grand scheme, it doesn't seem like that's
Especially since this is going to be a revenue generating.
and impacting so many residents.
Okay, so if the council is clear on that, what you would like us to do, we can move forward on that unless we really can't find that money.
okay. Let us know if that
That's
has to
fair.
change.
And I wasn't anticipating the mailing everybody, and that's in terms of timing, given the holidays and the staff availability. There's we can try our best, but it's possible that we may not be able to meet the deadline.
To notify 2,000 so people, that would, you'd want to have a contracted service do that, not you all, but again, increase the cost.
Yeah, like get it to the printer.
Right.
Which we know from Ashley, I don't think she's on anymore, what that deadline was, because we were trying to meet that deadline for the January 27th
Communications.
communication.
The meal thing.
And that deadline may have passed in terms of trying to get it out the first week in January. This doesn't necessarily need to hit that same time frame. We want people to know before January 24th. We don't want people to get it in their mail January 23rd.
Right.
But okay, I think we have enough direction, and we
Okay.
can
All right.
do our best
Okay.
to
Let us know, if it's just impossible to meet the deadline. Both in staff time and in deadlines for services. I don't think there was any action on this, was there?
Wonderful hearing.
Sorry. That would be pretty obvious. Details. I'm looking for the. Yep. All right. Yeah. Got both ears. Is there anyone online who has any comments about this topic, rental registry, that would like to share them with us now? Please raise your hand in Zoom. Give it a couple more seconds while I find this motion.
I've
Perfect. Not seeing anyone on Zoom, so Andrew, please take it away.
I'll move the city council warn a public hearing for the rental registry and inspection ordinance to be held on January 24, 2024.
So, motion and a second. Not hearing any discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Aye.
nay. Ayes have it. Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
If you're sticking around for this one too. 5D, discussion and consideration of urban forestry grant for trees for Main Street Park.
Okay. So, staff was looking at this grant program for the Main Street Park to try to offset the cost to the city for the trees in that park. At budget day, there's pretty clear that the council wants to prioritize the Amtrak train station project over Main Street Park. So we are trying to figure out if we can still make this grant program work for us in some kind of useful way. I've had a little bit of back and forth with Warren and Nick of the Tree Advisory Committee, and thinking through what their needs are, also considering their $10,000 in the general fund, in the proposed general fund budget, and what we could potentially use this grant for if we're not using it, if we're not going for the Main Street Park. The grant is due January 5th. I can't give you any more specific direction on what we could potentially pivot and use this for the Tree Advisory Committee. So my recommendation is, if it's possible for staff to pull together a specific application by January 5th for this money, then we'd be fine doing this. This is a one-to-one cost share. It's not going to be a significant amount of money one way or the other. My understanding is these funds are either from ARPA or the infrastructure bill. So they've got a decent amount of money they're trying to move through the program now, but that's not necessarily going to be the case always. So we thought it made sense to try to put something in for this grant. But that's what I have to say. It's very confusing and murky. I apologize.
So you'd like the flexibility to apply for it if it makes sense to do so on a general basis for the city, as opposed to directing it specifically towards the park.
Yes.
And you just like the guidance on whether we want you to do that or not.
Yes.
Okay. There is a motion on page 36 that I've got queued up, but how do people feel about this?
I'm fine with it moving forward. As the guy who started that conversation on budget day, I will say that I'm totally okay with that. I will say that if for some reason, again, looking at that particular space, right now, I don't believe that that's a priority to make it how like the last design that I saw was. But if you did put a couple of trees there, that would do a lot. I don't know if that is a priority either, but I will just throw that out there. But I'm okay with staff moving forward.
I'm okay with it as long as it's not for Main Street Park. I just don't think that should be a priority.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's feasible if we were to just simply try to plant trees. Too much soil and capping would have to be done, if I remember correctly from the limited recollection I have. This grant would have to just be for trees somewhere in the city, and we make up for it in the park for another time.
Correct.
Anyone else? No? All right. I will move that the city council authorize city staff to apply for the communities caring for canopy grant.
For something else in the city is, I think, what you.
For use citywide. Or is that, what did you say? Sorry.
Yeah, I think the grant's going to have to be specific.
Oh.
Staff discretion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
That's with staff discretion.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. And we have an executive session. So let's go through the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Great. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Great. Motion passes. Reading file. Regina, did you have
Okay.
anything you want to start with?
Yes, I just have a few
Thank you, Chris.
other things.
Thank you, Chris.
So just to clarify on the CVE letter, so prior there was a template edit that we used from previous years that said that the city council waives fireworks during the fair, I believe. You have not waived any fireworks during the fair. CVE also is not intending to do any fireworks at the fair. Only fireworks that we are aware of right now is our own on 4th of July. The letter has been amended to say that if there are any fireworks, they have to follow the process as spelled out in the sound indemnification agreement, which would come forward to you. So that's the plan. Also, policy, procedure-wise, we will make sure to get the 4th of July fireworks through the correct approval process. Fire department, police department, public works will get on your agenda so folks are aware of it. And that's what we'll do.
Great.
If that's clear.
Yes.
Okay. I believe there's a article in the reading file. Yep, it's 7E, but just wanted to point out that Efficiency Vermont did do that article about the wastewater treatment facility and our partnership with them. So it's a great article. People haven't taken a look at that. EJRP received $1,900 in donations and purchased new winter gear for 50 kids in need in the city. So
great.
Exciting. On the storm, thankfully we did pretty well. We just moved a lot of water through the wastewater treatment facility, way more than we ever have, probably way more than we did in the July storm. We just lost some bugs. So bugs are really critical in the system and we were able to get some bugs from South Burlington. So thank you to South Burlington's treatment facility because they fared pretty well. And so we should be in fairly good shape there. We did lose a beaver baffle up on Indian Brook on Hubble's Falls culvert. But essentially what that does is gives the beavers something else to work on and prevents them from putting a dam in the culvert. So that is unfortunate that we lost that. We'll try to think on that in the spring on trying to get that back in place. I think that is all I have.
Great.
I'm sorry. I did want to mention that for the wastewater treatment facility, Monday night, we had 3 staff, Art, as well as both Jasons. We have 2 Jasons at the wastewater treatment facility. They stayed late to get a pump up and running so that we could make another tank operational. So we had all of them going, which we also haven't done before, and that was really hugely beneficial to make that work. So that. Now I think that is.
That's fantastic. Anyone have anything else? No? Okay. So there is, I'll just make these motions for the executive session. I move the city council make the specific finding that general public knowledge of a contract would place the city at a substantial disadvantage. In motion 2, I move the city council enter an executive session to discuss a contract pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1A to include the city council and city manager. And do we need to include the finance director and wastewater treatment plant director?
And HR director.
And HR director. 3 directors.
Second.
Great. Not seeing any hearing any discussion. All those in favor of approving both motions, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. Great. Both motions pass. think we're going to try to use this room because we have so many joining from Zoom. Scott, I don't think we're going to be long, but if you can, great.